Welcome to our today's Folio Forum. My name is Peter Murray, and I am the open source community advocate at Index Data and the host for today's event. Our topic today is an update from the reporting community on building reports. This session, like all Folio forums, is being recorded and will be posted to the Open Library Foundation YouTube channel. Please use the YouTube chat box to ask questions or make comments, and I will be holding the questions until the end to ask our panelists then. If you like to tweet, please use the Twitter hashtag FolioForum, and I'll pose those questions and comments to the panelists as well. We have 7 speakers today, and I'll be introducing them as we go along. First up is Nassar from Index Data. He leads the LDP project and is the project manager for Folio reporting. Previously, Nassib has been CEO of an open source software company and a senior research scientist at the University of North Carolina, as well as an assistant director of informatics at Duke University. Nassib, are you online and ready to take over screen sharing?
Thank you, Peter. Yes, I'm online, and I think I just need someone to unshare. Ah, that may have just happened. Let me try. How's that?
Okay, yes, we can see you.
Well, there now. Thank you, Peter. I'd like to welcome everyone here today, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to learn about the work of the reporting community in Folio. It surprises me in a way how far we've come since beginning development on reporting in late 2018. And that's in large part thanks to our active community centered in the reporting SIG, which is chaired by Sharon Beltaine from Cornell. And our presenters this morning are librarians, developers, and data analysts from several universities. They are the people that are really making reporting a reality in Folio. Let me say a few words about how reporting is structured at a very high level. On this slide, we have 3 projects: Folio, the Library Data Platform, or LDP project, and the Reshare Resource Sharing project. The LDP project is partnering with the Folio reporting community and with Reshare to develop library reporting and analytics capabilities that can be used by both of those projects and potentially others as well. Today, we will be talking really about Folio reporting and not LDP per se, but because LDP is going to be there in the background, I wanted to give you a very quick thumbnail sketch of what it is. LDP is a software server platform that works with database like PostgreSQL or Amazon Redshift to provide a database environment for library reporting and analytics. It's the first scalable analytics platform specifically designed for libraries that's community owned, open source, and completely free of vendor lock-in. The same reasons libraries have chosen to use Folio and Reshare, but particularly important here because the LDP potentially stores a lot more data than Folio or Reshare. Excuse me. It supports ad hoc cross-domain SQL queries, and it works with popular tools, so you have a lot of flexibility in designing reporting, visualization, and dashboards. And what it does is basically extracts and updates data from a Folio or Reshare database. It also stores historical data, so you can analyze trends over time and develop insights about your library. It's a very, very scalable platform for cross-domain integration of external data sets, and it positions your library well for advanced analytics. And we have a rapidly growing community and ecosystem of tools. LDP stores data extracted from Folio and updates the data every 24 hours. We're also working on real-time data streaming, which we expect to have later this year. With LDP, you own the software and your data, and you can run it on your hardware if you wish. Again, there is no vendor lock-in. If you want commercial support, my own company, Index Data, provides consulting and hosting for LDP, but you can hire any technical consultant or hosting provider that you wish and ask them to support LDP, or you can develop the technical experience in-house. You're about to see some reporting queries that run on LDP data, and I wanted to show you how the data look. This is an example of what a typical record looks like. It's a loan record extracted from Folio. The original extracted data, which are in JSON format, are stored in a relational attribute called data, basically the bottom half of this record. And that offers access to the complete source data available from Folio. LDP unpacks some of the JSON fields into relational attributes, the top half of this screen, to enable relational queries and basically to simplify writing the queries. Now, some JSON fields are not yet unpacked by LDP, but for now you can access them using a function called JSON extract path text, which lets you specify a path into the nested JSON fields. In this case, we're specifying the name field that's nested inside the status field. You may notice some examples of this in today's presentations. In the LDP project, we recently added a unique feature which can analyze Folio data to uncover foreign key relationships. Folio does not document foreign key relationships between modules, but we were able to generate a complete Folio schema by using LDP to analyze the raw data. This is now a feature built into LDP, so you'll be able to generate this for your own particular LDP instance. But I like this example because it really shows the potential of having the data and being able to analyze them all in one place. I wanted to show an example of LDP with visual query building, which I know can be useful for exploring data. This is using Metabase, an open source analytics tool. Metabase can also create visualizations and dashboards with LDP. So feel free to check out LDP on GitHub in the Library Data Platform organization. The Folio reporting community uses a GitHub repository called Folio Analytics to develop reporting queries. In a moment, my colleague Angela Zoss is going to talk about how we have organized this work, but I wanted to stress that this is an open community. You can go to GitHub and look at the queries we're developing and feel free to join in or join the reporting SIG if you'd like to start there. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact us. Now, I've seen a preview of today's talks and they're very interesting, so I hope you'll enjoy them as much as I have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Nassib. I am going to pick up the screen sharing, and it is my pleasure to introduce Angela Zoss from Duke University. She works in the libraries in the user assessment and user experience department. She's been a member of the Folio reporting SIG since the fall of 2018, and she helps organize the SIG's query development work and documentation. Angela, take it away, and I'll advance your slides as you tell me to.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Peter. And thank you, Nassib, for that really excellent introduction to the software. Excuse me, and to some of our query techniques. So next slide. I want to provide a little bit of context for how the the work of developing reports is progressing and is being organized. So our software is wonderful and is giving us access to the, excuse me, to the data that are in Folio and in other tools and software. Thanks, sorry. But rather than provide software only, we are also organizing efforts around developing a set of queries that we know will be extremely useful for the library users of this platform. And in order to do that, we want to coordinate the efforts of our entire reporting SIG and other partners to guide the development of reports. So the goals of that report development work is to make sure that we have a starting catalog of Folio queries that lives and breathes and develops over time, so that when people implement Folio, they have something right off the bat that can help them access and analyze the data coming out of that tool. We want to make sure that this work is distributed across our community so that we are fluid and can react to new opportunities and can keep our membership growing. We want to maintain a tight connection to the functional area subject matter experts in the Folio community and the app developers so that the queries we're writing really have the best information about the data available in Folio and what's possible and what is expected. And we want to make sure that report builders have the ability to learn from each other and to build their skills in report development and get the best practices really trained throughout the community. So on the next slide, I'm sharing the 4 teams that we've built in the reporting SIG to focus on different aspects of report development. We decided that people could best build their skills for report development by focusing on 1 or 2 specific areas of the Folio data model to become experts in and to use as the main area that they develop both our prototypes and queries. So those 4 areas are a combination of resource access and user management, metadata management, resource management, and then e-resource management. Each of these areas has slightly different apps and data models that they'll be working with. There's overlap certainly, and we want to maintain communication between the areas, but people often find it easy to specialize in 1 or more of these areas. Next slide again. So in terms of how we organize the work across our 4 teams, we try to keep a consistent workflow for developing a query. That starts with this very large effort to gather report specifications that happened over the course of 2 years with constant communication through the Folio community. Those were converted into issues in our JIRA project called REP. And they were really built from a very large effort to gather external feedback. Those report requests were then sent through a process of clustering, or what we call clustering, and what you might think of as deduplication. We wanted to look for areas of overlap between those reports to make sure that we were not duplicating effort or creating multiple reports when one could serve. And those clusters became UX prod issues. And we chose to use UX prod because that is where we continue to gather external feedback. Those issues are ranked by the community and prioritized. Once we have a priority for a particular cluster, it moves into the prototype phase. It gets issues in the LDP query project in JIRA, and it also gets some wiki pages because we feel like wiki pages are easier for the community to understand and to edit and to contribute to. And prototypes allow us to identify the specific data elements that are required for a report and to verify the connections between different data modules. After the prototype is complete, it moves into query development phase, which is the actual SQL code that's being developed. That code, the SQL code, is being stored in a public GitHub repository Nassib's already mentioned. And there are also JIRA issues that track the development and the workflow of those queries. Finally, when the query has been vetted and it's gotten feedback from functional SIGs, and the report community has evaluated the code for style and for logic, then it gets pushed finally to our GitHub, and the final documentation is completed. Next slide. So just a reminder, our GitHub repository is public. This is what it looks like. You'll see a series of folders at the top, one of which is called the SQL folder. That's where we're storing the code that is being developed. And you'll see some of the code here has already been moved to GitHub, but that's an ongoing process. And on the next slide, and my final slide, I'll just show a quick example of what the query documentation looks like. Again, you see the file list at the top of the GitHub page, and that will include an SQL file and some other testing files. And then there's a README file, which displays below the file list to share some basic documentation of the query, what its intent is, and some sample output. So I'm very excited to turn this over to the rest of our speakers today, and thanks so much for joining us.
Great. Thank you, Angela. Next up is Vandana Shah from Cornell University, where she is the Research and Assessment Analyst. She's a member of the FOLIO reporting SIG. Her main areas of work are survey data, library metrics, data visualization, and statistical analyses. Are you ready?
I am ready, Peter.
Wonderful.
So, hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here and talk about one of the different areas of reporting that Angela mentioned. I'm part of the Resource Access and User Management Report Development team. And I'm going to talk about these resource access and user management reports today. So if you could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So resource access and user management reports, the way I've sort of structured this brief presentation is I'd like to talk to you about the types of reports and data that are included in this broad grouping. And then we'll look at a specific resource access example query, the purpose of this query, and then I'm going to actually go backwards and show you the results of a specific query, the data tables and connections that are included to run this kind of a query, and then do a brief demo using dbeaver, which is a free database tool that's available to developers. If we can have the next slide, please. So looking at types of reports that are included in resource access and user management, we have desk operations, internal and external, and problem resolution. So for desk operations, these reports are actually necessary for the basic functional aspects of a library. We have lost and missing items which need to be traced or replaced, and patron delivery requests. These things need to be delivered, and fines and fees which need to be collected. Internal and external is quite important, as is everything else actually, because these are actually reporting for the library, for the institution, and very often for also outside agencies. These are very often annual reports. And problem resolution, well, that's exactly what it is. These can be pretty much ad hoc reports, like if there's any issues happening with the patron record detail that you need to pull up on an ad hoc basis. For resource access and user management, actually, we have hundreds of data tables, but the specific kind of data that are included in these reports are circulation, courses, fees and fines, and inventory and user data. And I'm mentioning this because some of the data that we don't often touch is data such as some of the more financial data, like we don't use budget data, we don't touch vendor and organization data. That's very rare that that's the kind of data that is going to be included in resource access and user management data. Okay, if we can get to the next slide, please. Thank you. So looking at a very specific example query here, let's look at the count of loans and renewals. And this is a very fairly standard resource access query. It's a multi-purpose query over here. And for count of loans and renewals, it's used for problem solving and for reporting. You could review loans related to due dates, calendar issues, or patron fines, or for reporting, just monitor circulation volume. for a specific location or a date range or for multi-purpose for both these reasons. You could have multiple purposes for this specific query over here. It's a kind of a report. This query is adaptable for multiple purposes and it's often used over here. And so looking at after this, let's look at actually going backwards, as I said, instead of running the query first, let's look to see what this results look like when you run a query like this. And that will be the next slide, Peter. Thank you. So when you run this query, this is what the results look like. This is the actual reporting, the results of this query, the report. And you see over here standard fields which you would expect to see over here. You see a loan date, there's loan status, patron group name such as faculty, staff, or a location name. We're seeing some blank fields here because these are just test data right now. These are not real data that we're running these test queries from. And you would obviously, when you're running this for your own institution, you would see many, many, many more rows of data over here. And from this query, these results are then exported out to an Excel table, and then the reporter would be able to do whatever computations are needed, like the number of loans or the number of renewals, to then report out in for whatever things you need to see over here. So that's a quick look at the results table for this query. And after this, I'd like to just show you the few data connections that are necessary. Thank you. So in the LDP, we have hundreds of tables. And so these are the main groupings of tables that we use for resource access, such as inventory, circulation, and user tables. And these are just a few of the groupings and a few of the types of data tables that are used for this query. And so of course, we have to connect the tables. And some of you who have Voyager institutions or who use Voyager, obviously familiar with this. When we have a group of inventory tables, such as inventory items, location, loan types, and we're connecting circulation loan tables with items, the key connector here is the item ID. And we're connecting loans with loan types. Then we have a loan type ID, that's the connector over here. Or we're connecting users with loans, there's a patron group ID. And these will actually differ depending on what types of connections you're trying to make. So you just have to be a little bit aware of that. So I think now what I'd like to do is actually demo this using DeepWeaver, and I'm hoping that this is all going to work over here. So if you just give me a minute to see if this is working, that would be great. And I'm going to screen share over here in a moment. Share screen, and that would be screen 1 and share. And can you see DeepWeaver?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So because there's always just a fingers crossed kind of thing here. So here we are. This is the DeepWeaver connection, and Folio Snapshot is the test LDP data that we have to play with, which is wonderful to have. Public over here, these are all the these are all the tables that we have, which is really great. These are over 100 tables, and there's new data coming in and out of these pretty regularly. So for example, if I click on any one of these, like if I click on inventory holdings, just to give you a quick idea, right now we have 17 rows of data, and there's all these different values happening over here. We have some null values right now because these are test data in inventory holdings, and I can just click out of this and go back to all my very many tables over here. That exact query, loans and renewals, is what I have over here. And what I'd like to stress over here, and what we've stressed to a lot of people who work in reporting in our institution, is that this query has been written in SQL over here, and we've tried to make these fairly uniform, all our queries over here. So the very first part of all our SQL queries is where we have our filters. So if people come in and they want to use these over here, when they want to use our queries over here, if all they have to do is change the filters if they want. This report has date range and location as its filters. So people can come in and select the date they want for this report and select the location they want. And that's pretty much all they have to do. Of course, if they want to change anything else here with the SQL, they can feel free to go ahead and do that. But people who aren't too familiar with SQL and don't want to mess with it really don't have to. They get the code from GitHub and put it into whichever tool they're using. And sorry, this keeps coming up here. And just simply fill in their filter values over here. And then they can just go ahead and they can run. And right over here at the bottom, they get their results. And these are exactly the results that I showed you all earlier on in the results table. I had exported these into an Excel table to put up over there. And it's going to be as simple as that for all the reporters in the different institutions to be running all these queries, just adjusting them a little bit for whatever they need to adjust them for. So that's a quick demo of this query on dbeaver. And I think I'm going to just stop screen sharing and hand this back to Peter. If I figure out how to stop sharing here. Okay, there we go.
Great. Thank you for that live demo. It worked out fine. Next up, we have two. Scott Perry is starting from the University of Chicago. He's the head of collection support there at the University of Chicago Libraries. And Axel Dörrer from Mainz University. He's been working as the project coordinator for FOLIO there since February of this year. Before that, he worked at the Hessian Library Network and the University Library Frankfurt. Scott, I think you are first.
Thanks, Peter. Do you hear me? Yes, okay.
Yes.
Great. I'm going to introduce the resource management report section here. And really, resource management is about the acquisition and management of all resources. The reports and data that we're focusing on here are counts of library resources, finance, accounting, acquisitions, orders, vendors, and subscriptions. These are really focused on solving things for counts. Today is what we're going to look at, which is a count of tangible resources. We're not focusing on ERM today, even though that's a resource under resource management broadly, because the data structure is different, and so it's handled separately. And a lot of the reports in resource management will provide expenditure information for resources, counts of resources held, and support national statistics reporting, collection development decisions, and benchmarking. And now I'll turn it over to Axel to show you an actual query.
Okay, thanks, Scott. So we want to begin here to focus on the different counts we have in the RM group. As we see here, we have the title counts, the subscription counts, and the item counts, and they all based on different tables here. And that's what we want to show here in this diagram. To see, we have the different tables here, and they are belonging to different apps, and that's what we have to keep in mind when we begin to develop the prototype and the query itself, that we have relations between that. And sometimes we think that we might consider if there can be any other connections, but we at this time we just working with the connections that we have. And today, please the next slide. Thank you. But today we will focus on the title count query, and this query is designed to satisfy multiple record requests for physical held titles. and the results are more one count, and it does not provide, to keep in mind, a list or lists of titles. This is not the focus on this query. It's just going to show the counts, the aggregated counts on several terms. This query should allow the reporter to slice and dice their own need, the results to their own needs, and that's what we want to have here. We want to have a flexible query. We need the flexibility of this query because we have different requirements on that, and we have different. We want to satisfy multiple report requests on that, and also the reporters should be aware that the migration of their data from their old systems into the inventory storage might be different in some slightly, and they just have to keep in mind where their data or how their data is migrated. And so this is just thought as a start to how to get your counts. At the end, you should have refining on that, and I will show that later. So the examples of these counts that should fulfill with this query are the national US statistics as the ARL and the ACRL and the NCS, as well as the German library statistics, the DBS, and in general for all counts on all titles and on books and digital stocks. But keep in mind it's there's no electronic in a tangible form, and it does not include the electronic resources as said before by Scott, and because there are different queries for that to solve that. As well, there are no items or subscription counts, as we said, as we see before in the slide. These have specific queries because of their own base on counts. Okay, and on the next slide we see the structure of the query we have here. Vandana started with that. Thank you for that. This is a more high-level view on that. We begin with the query documentation to show what tables and what data fields are included. Then we have a with section where we do all the pre-processing and set variables for a filter on the query. And then it's followed by the main query itself. And there are the two sections, select and group by, in which we put all the data fields we want to aggregate on to have a better view on how the counts are shown. And then we have the from section. This is the starting table. And then we join all the tables with all the data we need on our query 2. And lastly, we have the where clause where all the filters are processed, and where all other filters can be set so that we can reduce our result set as we need it. So from now on, I want to show this in our main tool, the dbeaver 2, and it now should be familiar.
Yes, we can see it.
Yes, thank you. And as said, we have here are the two database connections we are using, the snapshot, and we're using the test data too. I'm using the test data at the moment because there are slightly more data in, and I think it's good to have a good database to test our queries on. So here we begin with our documentation, and it's great because it's quoted, so it's would be processed while we going our we are running our SQLs, and we see here we have all the tables and all the fields we are using. We have defined the JSON fields that we are pulling out of there also. We have the other tables and a lot of other tables we just want to have the name on. And then we declared here which aggregations are possible at the moment, what filters can be set by the users in a convenient way, what hard-coded filters we have for data we won't have in our accounts. And this is our section where we can have some things what have still to be done. So as we see here, it looks familiar to you because Vandana showed that too. In her query, it's a little bit bigger than hers because we want to have a real good flexibility on our queries. As you see here, we have a filter with 3 terms. We have, because we found that it may be useful to have more than 1 term to filter on in our query. So we just decided to count that up to 3, but it's possible to add that more as if needed. So then we have here the subqueries section, and as you see here, we did that pre-processing because we are pulling a JSON array element, and it can be that there is more than one term in here, more than one ID, so we have to slide it. And in the first section, we just pull all the format names in here. And then in the second, we are slicing all the possible format IDs and map them to the name of a format. And we did that to some other things where we also expecting that there can be more than one term too. So in the next section, we have the select section as and here the main query begins. And the select section will show us all the data fields we might we can aggregate to, and we are just pulling them in, and we have to keep them. We have to keep in mind to have the same fields all as well in the group by section that's at the end of the query, so that we can just aggregate on them. Then we have the from section, the from operator, where we just start, where we just declare the start table. And this was the base table we had before in our diagram, and then have a lot of joins where we want to have all our data in. And as we see here, we are working a lot with the as operator just to declare the table names or the other object names, and not to have them the long names later on, and to just refer on that in a short way later on. That is for this as operator. Sorry. And then as Vandana also showed before, we are just coupling these 2 tables by its IDs, and we just take the ID on the parent ID on the parent table, and bind them to the new ID of the new table of and so this joins will pull all the names and all the other data fields into that. As you see here, we have really a lot of joins here, and Nassib is really working hard to bring us some performance suggestions for that, and I think we will have them in a short time. We will have this improvements on the performance queries soon in here. So these are the joins. And now we are going here into the where clause, and we have the hard-coded filters. For example, we don't want to have any suppressed titles in here, and we don't have any online titles, only any non-virtual virtual titles in here. And after that, we are beginning here with all the to process all the set filters here. And as you see here, we are on one thing, we are using the in operator, which only is used for exact terms to find in. And if you're not sure, we can also use the like operator. So we can use you can use wildcards if you're not sure how how a term is you're looking for is really spelled from too. You can use the like operator on that. So these are all other fields on here, and if we just run that, we are seeing that. oh, what have I done? So that's it. So there it is, and ta-da, we have a really big result on here. And as I said, we just want to be really flexible on that. And on one thing, we can do do more filters on that to have a little smaller other. What is that? So okay, we can have a smaller result on that, or we just, and that was something I want to show you. We just take the raw thing, and you are able to export it out of dbeaver and pull it as a CSV and pull it into a pull it into a well-known Excel sheet. And from there on, you can just, you see, we have a comma separated CSV, and we just go in on the first column, go on data, and here's the text to columns. We just can have that here and use the comma, and then you can refine it afterwards here in Excel. You can hide some fields you don't want to have, but if you use the filters in Excel, you just can refine your things as you need. At the end, you can have all the text and say, oh, we only want the main library, and you just at the end have the counts on that here and can sum that up. So that's it for the moment. Thank you for the patience. And I want to hand over to Christie, which she will have a really specific title counts on that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Axel. Next up is Christie Thomas. She's the head of data management services at the University of Chicago Libraries. Located in the Technical Service Department, she oversees batch loading and catalog management operations, and she's a member of the FOLIO Metadata Management SIG. Christie.
Thank you. Thanks, Peter. So I want to start off by saying that the is really a community effort. We started off by pulling together anyone who is interested from the Metadata Management SIG to come together and work on the reporting, the report prototypes. And what this gave us was a lot of perspectives. We know different institutions represent characteristics of materials in different ways. So this gave us insight into what we needed to do in the various queries. Jennifer Eustace, Kevin Walker, and Laura Wright, and myself took the first prototype and have worked on it to develop the query that I'm going to show you today. I should also give special thanks to Angela and to Nassib, who have helped us learn to work with the FOLIO data in the LDP. My past experience is really with MySQL. I've never worked with PostgreSQL or with SQL queries of data stored in JSON. So this has been a real learning experience for us. So thank you for all of your contributions to what I'm about to share. Next slide. Thanks. So in the Metadata Management SIG, we prioritized a number of queries, and they're in 3 different buckets here. So the first bucket is the MARC metadata management queries. Those queries that we need to run to find data that needs remediation or enrichment, or to just provide quality control for our bibliographic data that is in MARC format. The MARC tables are not yet available in the LDP, so we have not actually started working on those reports quite yet. The next bucket are the reporting and statistics types of reports. These are reporting our holdings to HathiTrust or to OCLC, or performing collection analysis reports against our bibliographic and our holdings and item metadata. And then the third bucket are the workflow management types of reports. Those reports that we use to drive our operations in technical services, identifying uncatalogued materials, or using shelf lists or pick lists to identify pieces in the library, or collection management reports, things that identify pieces that need a certain treatment or need to be moved to your storage facility, et cetera, et cetera. The first report that and the query that I'm going to talk about today is the HathiTrust query. Next slide, please. So the first query that we began with was the HathiTrust print holdings query. So many of you are probably familiar with this report. It's a report that institutions use to provide HathiTrust with information about our print holdings. And it's divided actually into 3 different reports: single part monographs, multiple part monographs, and serials. And these reports are provided so that Hathi can do collection overlap analysis on our collections, and to drive institutional use of HathiTrust materials. And I know many of us are taking advantage of that, that feature right now. We started with the HathiTrust holdings report because it's a report that is in a standard format. All institutions who use this report are submitting their data to HathiTrust in the same format, but it also uses a lot of the properties that we're going to need to use over and over again in other metadata management reports. So we thought that it would be a good report to start with and provide us with a wide range of experience that we could use when building future queries. It also provided the added benefit of allowing us to have in-depth discussions about how different institutions represent specific characteristics about their materials, like the government document-ness of a piece, or how to distinguish between part monographs, multiple part monographs, and different institutions do that in different ways. So it was a flag that we needed to be very flexible in how we build these reports, so that a wide array of institutions can make use of them. Next slide, please. So we started with the HathiTrust single part monograph report because it is the largest of the 3 reports for most institutions. And it just seemed like a good place to start. On the left here, I've listed all of the filters that we identified for use in the prototype process of building this query. So we're using instance status, whether or not it has an OCLC number, because HathiTrust does require an OCLC number in their reports. The instance format, it's only physical print materials that HathiTrust is interested in having reported out. The resource type, the mode of issuance, and the last filter here is one that is really specific to the University of Chicago and how we currently count or differentiate between our multiple part monographs and our single part monographs. Our logic is that any instance that has any items with enumeration is considered a single part monograph. Is this clean? No, but it's how we approach it. We know that other institutions use physical description in the presence of V versus, or volume versus pages. So we need to account for that in the final query that we are going to provide for use throughout the project. I should also note that we are actually using University of Chicago data. We have an LDP sandbox that has all of our data available in it. So we've been running these queries against our Chicago sandbox as a test, as a way to test and validate the query. And that's actually been really exciting. Some of the filters that I'm sharing with you today are specific to our institution, because that is the data that we are working with for building and testing and validating the query. But the final query will be have options for institutions that maybe approach that differentiation differently. The report for single part monograph has five properties. The instance HRID, the human readable ID. We've thought about this, we call this the bib ID in our current system. The OCLC number, the holding status, whether or not it's currently held, it's withdrawn, or lost and missing. The condition of the piece, and whether or not it's a United States government document. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start off by showing you, I'm actually not going to do a live demo for time's sake of our query, but I'm going to show you every single piece of our query, and it's just in the slides. So like some of the other queries that you've seen demonstrated, we started off with a number of subqueries for extracting properties from the JSON data object in the instance holdings and item records. So here you can see where we pulled out all of the fields that are stored in those JSON data objects in the LDP. Next slide, please. So I included just a snippet here. So this is a screenshot. In the top left, you can just see a couple of rows from our instance table, and then you can see how the final column includes a a data object in JSON format. Excuse me. And I've included a screenshot snippet of the JSON on the right, so that you can see what we're doing. Because these data elements aren't pulled out and it is stored individually in the table, we need to actually on them. This is proved to be a bit of a challenge. Like I said, we were working against the Chicago data set. We currently have, which currently has about 8.5 million instances and the associated holdings and items in it. And we are able to, we've actually had to work with actually a subset of our data, because pulling all of the data out with those subqueries before actually running the query is not an efficient way of querying across that much data. So we're actively working on how the best approach to take to optimize working with the data in those JSON objects when you're dealing with large data sets. And it's great. I'm really excited to be learning so much about how to work with JSON and how to do these queries efficiently. Next slide, please. So this is the next piece of the query, and it's actually the select statement for the report. You can see that we have the instance HRID as the local ID. We're including the OCLC number that we've pulled out of the JSON object. We have some logic that is providing the Hathi terms based on item status. For the holding status. We currently do not have, at Chicago, we actually are not able to report out on condition right now because we store it in so many different places. So this is something that for the purposes of this query, we're not reporting out, and we're going to work on how different institutions are recording that information and figuring out how to get it in the final report. That's the next step that we have. I've actually commented out, including the enumeration and chronology for the items, because that is not required for the single part monographs report. It is required for the multiple part monographs report. And I've also commented out the ISSN, because that is also not required for the single part monographs report, but we wanted to include it because, again, it is required for the serials report if it's available. The next flag you will see is whether or not a piece is a US government document. And we discovered that it is not as easy as one would think to determine that. There are any number of ways that we are recording and maintaining that information across our institutions. So we've actually flagged this as an issue that we're going to take back to the metadata management SIG so that we can discuss what are our options for managing this data point better. And so that's actually a great opportunity that has come out of having those of us in the metadata management SIG actually working on these queries. We realized where we could be doing things differently or better, and as a community we can try and address those, not in the report by working around our data, but optimizing our data in the first place. So that's really exciting. Next slide, please. So here are all the joins from the table, and there's a lot of them. We're joining all of the LDP tables along with all of the temporary tables that will be up by the subqueries pulling the JSON data out. So you can get a sense about how complex the query is. And next slide, please. So here are our filters, and you can see most of the majority of the filters are going to be the same from institution to institution. You can see the filters for resource type and for format. You can also see that, so instance status name, I thought that I had highlighted that. I apologize for it not being highlighted, but those are going to be parameters that are unique to institutions. So instance statuses that we report out at Chicago are currently available in that property. Mode of issuance and format are going to be relatively stable across institutions. And then finally, you see that where clause. And this is how, again, the University of Chicago currently distinguishes between single part monographs. So what I've done is I'm selecting instances where none of the items have enumeration. Next slide, please. And finally, here is the reports that we got. So you can see that on our subset of data, it ran really quickly. And again, we're going to be returning to how to optimize it and get it to run against our entire data set. That's going to be another of our next steps in the metadata management reporting collaboration working group. And with that, I will turn it back over to, I think Sharon is next.
Yes, Sharon is next. Thank you, Christie. Sharon works in the Library Systems Department at Cornell University Libraries, where she provides a broad range of analysis, reporting, and application support for core library systems. To her role as the FOLIO reporting SIG convener, she brings a rich background of data analysis, business analysis, and IT project management. As Sharon wraps us up here, I encourage you to put questions and comments into the YouTube chat or onto Twitter, and we'll ask them at the end. In the meantime, Sharon, please.
Thank you so much, Peter. If I could have the next slide, that would be great. Thank you. So why is the reporting SIG developing FOLIO report prototypes and queries? Well, first and foremost, libraries depend on solid analytics to support key library functions every day, such as circulation workflows, data quality control, system troubleshooting, expenditures, annual statistics, historical trends, and executive decision making. Working together to build a FOLIO report repository of report documentation and templates for report writers to use at their institutions will provide a significant boost to launching data delivery services at each institution implementing FOLIO with the library data platform. In addition, as we work together in these teams to build these reports, we're learning more about how the FOLIO data structures work and how to make the most of our reporting tools to provide analytics to our libraries. Because many of our reporting needs are similar, we can work together to build one cluster report prototype and query that satisfies the reporting requirements of many institutions. This is just one example of the many ways in which we find that as we work together, the benefits of collaboration are exponential. Together, we're building the skills we'll need as report writers and data managers to redesign our library resources to leverage the strengths of this new open source platform. So how can you get involved? If your institution doesn't have a representative on the reporting SIG, please do consider asking a representative to join our team. My contact information is listed in the reporting SIG homepage. Just send me an email message and I'll get you started. If I could have the next slide, please. So I just want to mention that right now we're looking for a few specific skill sets to join specific teams. You're also welcome to join as a general report representative if you want to find out more about reporting. Right now we're seeking an SQL developer or a subject matter expert for resource access reports. In this role, you would write queries for resource access reports and or build the prototypes, the specs that we need for the resource access reports. The requirements are all there. Everything's very well organized. As I've said before, we have the machine. We just need a bit more fuel in this area. If I could have the next slide, please. Another critical area where we need support right now is a test data developer. So we're looking for someone who's interested in working with us on in this role. The test data developer will curate and generate test data for the FOLIO reporting test environment. You saw some examples of our test data environment. There's a lot involved with coordinating and curating that information, so we could use some help in that area. So if you're interested in working on that with us or have someone in mind, please don't hesitate to reach out. I want to thank all of our presenters today, and also Peter for hosting our presentation so well. Thank you to all those who are connecting right now to check this out. We really appreciate your joining us, and don't hesitate to reach out if you'd like to find out more.
Great. Thank you, Sharon. We did have a question and a comment come in to YouTube. So let me relay those now. And while I'm doing that, feel free to put other questions and comments there. One question was about data privacy. How are we going to ensure patron privacy for past loans? Will that information be anonymized when the item is checked in, but still available for statistical analysis by format or patron type? And Nassib, I know that there is some work that you have planned for this coming up in the next rounds of development for the LDP. Could you talk to us a little bit about the plans for patron privacy?
Sure. We've already prototyped anonymization of personal data. We have a working group in the reporting SIG that's looking at specific fields that should be anonymized for GDPR compliance in the basically in the FOLIO data model. So we're looking at data privacy mainly in terms of GDPR compliance. And so we're approaching it in two stages. The first stage is to implement anonymization of all personal data in FOLIO for LDP 1.1, which is the next major release later this year. And then after that, we plan to support the requirements of GDPR that are required if you don't anonymize the personal data. If you do store the personal data in LDP, then GDPR requires some auditing features and the ability to delete specific people's personal data. And so to the question about statistical analyses, it's going to depend on how you configure LDP. Do you want personal data anonymized? And if you use full anonymization as required by GDPR, then that's going to limit some analyses in some areas, just because the data won't be, some of the linkages might not be there. If you are willing to store the personal data, that will enable some additional analyses that you can do. And but if your library is required to be GDPR compliant, then you'll probably have to wait until we have full support for the auditing and deletion requirements before you disable anonymization and actually store the data. So that's a little bit of a complicated answer, but I hope it's clear.
Thanks, Nassib. Also want to thank Aaron for chiming in with an answer in the YouTube chat as well. We also got a wholehearted endorsement of optimizing our data when it's migrated into Folio so that there are fewer workarounds with the data when it comes to reporting. So that exciting part of as the software is being built, these kinds of tests and experiments are going on, and informing that feedback loop back into the development again. Another great part of being a part of the Folio project and the open source community. I don't see any other questions, so I'll give our panelists one last chance to chime in with thoughts before we close. Anything from anyone?
Well, I just wanted to repeat again, thank you to all of our presenters, and for there's a large community behind these presenters that has also contributed a lot. And as always, thank you, Peter, for your expert moderation.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, this concludes today's Folio Forum from the reporting community on an update to building reports. You can continue the conversation at the Folio discussion website, discuss.folio.org, and on Twitter using the hashtag FolioForum. The recording of today's forum will be posted to the Open Library Foundation YouTube channel. If you're not already subscribed to that YouTube channel, you can find it by searching for Open Library Foundation. If you have feedback on this forum or have an idea for a future forum, please contact the forum facilitators at olay-lists.openlibraryfoundation.org. Thank you to Angela, Nassib, Vandana, Scott, Axel, Christie, and Sharon, and to everyone else who asked questions and added comments. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.